Computer. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm Jen Carpenter. Today I have Dr. Dhru B with me. I basically record these videos and share on my YouTube channel and other platforms just to add value to my network for home-based business owners, entrepreneurs, and small business owners to know more about what people do in the network that I have and how they can provide value to you. So, Dhru, just introduce yourself a little bit about kind of the basis of what you do, and then maybe share a recent story about how you've helped some people in your business.
Sure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity, Jen. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
So I'm Dr. Dhru B. I'm a business and executive coach, and I help individual entrepreneurs as well as business owners to overcome the limitations that are holding them back. And those are self-imposed limitations, Jen. As you and I both know, mindset is the biggest limitation on a small and medium size, well, really any business owner. But we don't really think about that stuff. We think about it as like hard skills or getting certifications or doing these other things. And really, at the end of the day, the most important thing is mindset. And so I think, one of the things I want to stress with folks is knowledge has never been easier to come across than it is today, right? If you really have the motivation to get something done or to do something, you can find the knowledge. And people tend to limit, they're like, oh, that person doesn't have experience doing that, doesn't know what they're doing. And experience is no substitute for that, sure. But if someone's motivated, has the right mindset, they will find a way to get something done. They'll go seek out the knowledge themselves, they'll go after it, and they'll be really creative about how they get things done. And for those people who are a little older, remember MacGyver. MacGyver was motivated to do things, and he did things in really cool and innovative ways, solved a lot of problems that people wouldn't think of, those solutions. Those are the kind of people you want to be hiring and want to be interacting with. And if you're meeting people who are focusing so much on certifications and just skills, and you can spend $1 million in certifications and still have zero clients. So at the end of the day, it's more important to have the right mindset than it is the right skill set.
Awesome. So, what types of industries do you typically work with? And what does it really look like when someone brings you on? Do you work with the team? Do you work with one-on-one? Is it your speaking that you bring? What kinds of things do you bring to the table? And what sort of industries do you really like to work with?
Sure. Kind of all the above, honestly. I mean, so we're industry agnostic, and the common thread is leadership, right? And that's across every different company you have, no matter what industry you're in. Leadership is at a premium, as you can see with a lot of tech companies, especially in the recent news. They've been doing a lot of layoffs, not because they have to, but just because everyone else is doing it. That's a lack
Oh,
of leadership, right? A lot of
okay.
times these companies, they'll justify it by the market or whatever, right? But if their CEOs are still getting bonuses, which they are, then they can afford to keep people on more. And that's where the BS comes up. So it's really that leadership concept, right? And in terms of who we work both on the individual level as well as, well, not both, but all three: individual, team, and organizational levels. And I've got a team of coaches that come in and can support me as we go into larger organizations to do like an organizational wide transformation, whether that's culture, whether it's leadership, whether it's DEI and all those kind of conversations, DEI being diversity, equity, inclusion. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to leadership. If you don't have strong leaders who are empowered and who know what they're doing and have the right mindset, they're going to make decisions like cutting 30% of your labor force and then still giving all the executives bonuses because that's what makes sense.
What kinds of things do you tend to see are lacking in the leadership role? When you speak of mindset or organization, what are the biggest things you tend to find, the problems that you solve really? What else are these people doing wrong? What kind of, like you said, culture, DEI, there's all those things. But what are the biggest things that you kind of see stand out or most recently, with some clients you've worked with?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it's scarcity mindset, frankly, and fear, right? And there are two things that motivate us, right? There's fear or there's desires, goals, whatever you want to call it. The other one, love, whatever, fear and
Yeah.
love, right?
Yeah.
The Michael Scott answer is you want people to fear how much they love you, right? But at the end of the
Okay.
day, it's really it's those one of those two things that motivates you. And a lot of times these CEOs and like, leaders in organizations, through no fault of their own, really, at the end of the day, because they've never seen good leadership, right? You can only model something that you've seen. So if you've never seen a good leader in an organization or in the field you're in, you're not going to know what that looks like. So you're just going to operate based on what you've already done. So you're going to say, for example, I had a really crappy leader growing up, or in this business or whatever. And you're not going to think about it as a crappy leader. You know how you feel, but you just like, oh, that's just the reality. Everyone's this way, right? and you won't feel like you can create a whole new type of leadership that is actually effective. So you'll be like, oh, that's how everyone in this field is. Like big firm attorneys, for example, right? That world, the corporate attorney world, is so toxic and so ridiculous in many firms, because it's just the level of leadership that they invest in. They don't really invest in leaders; they invest in attorneys. And you have a really great skill set. You can be an amazing attorney, a really highly skilled engineer, or whatever. That doesn't mean you're going to be a good leader, right? The most egregious example is you have a salesperson who's like number one, they're kicking ass, they're like 50% of the sales of the whole team of 5 people comes from one person, right? Well, what do? They promote that person. Hey, you know what, Jen, you're doing an amazing job, you're carrying the whole team this year, now we're going to make you a manager of the team. Well, what they do, they just killed your productivity, they killed your motivation. Maybe you don't want to be a leader of people, maybe you just love sales, and now, by the way, you're also not doing as much sales as you could have. So your sales numbers have dropped, your productivity has dropped, the team is demotivated because they're like, well, there's no point. We're not going to meet Jen's numbers. There was no point. And they wonder why they screwed up. And then they're like, oh, Jen, why do you suck as a manager? Well, you didn't train me to be a manager. I'm a salesperson, right? That's the biggest mistake that I see people make in terms of like those skilled professions, right? Because they don't know how to actually promote from within or how to actually get people involved. The other mistake is bringing someone from the outside who has no familiarity with the team, who has no concept of anything, who also is a good salesperson, but not necessarily a good manager, right? Because they're looking for the wrong thing. It's like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree. It's not really going to help very much, right?
I like that. Fish climbing trees. No, that's a really great perspective, to know that that's what's really happening. People hear about it, talk about it, but I mean, it sounds like it's more frequent than one would be aware of.
Oh
And
yeah.
they could definitely use your help. So when you do work with a team, pardon me, what kinds of, are they going to go through, um, group events, speaking? I know you said you do one-on-one too. What are some of kind of the topics you cover in that leadership realm, I guess,
Yeah. So I mean, a
when
lot
you're
of it's
working with
really
them?
diagnosing and assessing what the situation is in the moment, right? So every leader is going to be dealing with different stories, and we deal in stories. Mindset is all about stories, right? What stories am I telling myself today? Are they productive stories or are they not productive stories? And a lot of times, because of the way we operate our lives, we don't really pay attention to the stories we tell ourselves. We just believe that they're fact,
Yeah.
and reality is not what we perceive, right? But what we perceive is reality to ourselves. So the more we create those stories around different things, like, oh, Jen looked at me weird today, she must really be upset at me. No, it sounds like high school, right? Because it is high school, and we operate with that kind of mindset in your entire life. And so now it's like people are 40 years old, deeply uncomfortable with how that person looked at them, because they're making up these stories in their heads that are influenced more by themselves than that person. And then when they go talk to that person, they're like, "Oh no, I'm just in my head. I'm thinking about the stove. Did I leave the stove on? I have no idea, but I happen to be looking in your direction when that happened." And you're like, "Oh, okay, cool, right? I just made that
Yeah.
up in my head, right?"
I'm sure it happens all the time in many aspects. It's
Yeah. So
funny
helping
that,
people.
you
Good.
think about it, it's like elementary or high school, but to know that adults and business people, still think this way and that they don't have the awareness of it at all. It all starts with awareness. The awareness of it at all it sounds ridiculous when you talk about it, but it's real.
No, it's 100% real, and that's why I named my company Nayan Leadership. Nayan Leadership. Nayan means eyes, and the whole idea is you can't change something you're not aware of, right? So it's bringing self awareness first. That's the first and most important
Awesome.
thing we can do. And even if the client doesn't necessarily isn't ready for action in the moment, in our 6 or 12 or 18-month engagement together, the point is to bring awareness to as much as possible, so that they at least have the choice of what they want to work on and what they want to change in their life. Sometimes they change things after we work together, and because we worked on certain things that are more higher priority for them in the moment. But as they build awareness around these things, they can choose what they want to work on. And so that's really what it looks like. We start with some kind of an assessment of some sort, whether it's an individual assessment, team assessment, or organizational assessment.
Okay.
And then we build on that, and we say, okay, what goals do we want to identify here that we want to work on together for the next minimum 6 months for me, six
Okay.
months, 12 months, 24 months, whatever makes sense.
Okay.
And that's going to change depending on what
Awesome.
the goals are.
Very cool. What's kind of a brief story of kind of a radical transformation that you've seen in some of the businesses you've worked with what you do?
Yeah. So I mean, one great example is there was a solopreneur. He became a friend of mine later, but he was a solopreneur. Reached out to me, said he was having trouble growing his business. He kept hitting a wall, and we talked through it, and the wall was him. Right? He was really hitting his own wall, But he didn't realize at the time, and we talked through it, and it was really his stories. He was talking himself out of, one, charging more, two, respecting his own time and energy and work, right?
Yes.
And then three, actually being able to tell clients, hey, I know we planned for an hour, but I spent 3 hours with you, so you owe me 2 hours more, of work. And he was uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable with that. And it's like, dude, no, you did the work. You got to make that part of your agreement up front. Like, I mean, obviously, if you set the expectation that you're only charging them for an hour, regardless of how long you
I
work
was
with them,
just gonna say that. In my head, I said I would hope he would have set the expectation prior, to respect his own time and others. I totally said the same thing in my head.
yeah. And he didn't, because he was afraid, right? He's afraid it's going to scare away customers. And I'm
Okay.
like, dude, if those customers aren't ready to pay for your time and energy, they're not your customers. They're not worth it,
Yes. Yes.
And getting him to make that shift for himself, it took about 8 months to get that one shift, because mindset shifts are terribly tough to deal with, because
Oh, yeah.
you're dealing with 30, 40, 50, 60 years sometimes of
Yes.
that story, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
undoing
We
that takes
talked
time.
about this
Yep.
recently. Yeah. No, that's totally okay. Very cool. And how long did you end up working with him, you said?
We worked together for 7 months, and then he actually ended
Wow.
up doubling his income in that time.
Wow.
So yeah.
Fantastic. Perfect story. Perfect.
Yeah.
If there's any other things you want to add, I don't want to take up too much of your time or, the people watching just love to introduce great people like you and what you do. So if there's anything else you'd like to add about where people can connect with you and where to go from here, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on all socials. So my YouTube channel, my LinkedIn is Dhru B, DHRUBEE. And then my Instagram is Dhruva B with a VA in the middle, because someone stole Dhru B somehow. I don't know why, but happens. But yeah, you can find me anywhere there. I also have a podcast called Ikigai Leadership, where I share stories of business owners and successful people, some of whom are pretty relatively famous, and some of whom are less known, but they still have amazing stories. So all about stories. Thanks, Jen.
Awesome. I see. I recently recorded with you as well, so
Yep.
that'll be out at some point with Drew and I, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the other episodes. So you said it's called Ikigai Leadership. I don't know if you speak pretty fast, Drew.
I do.
Ikigai Leadership, which is a really cool thing to check out. So is that just on Spotify or
Spotify
where's
and
your
Apple.
podcast?
So
And
it's on
Apple
Spotify
too?
and Apple both. Yep.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you for joining me today. I know this is extremely valuable to those watching. So connect with me as well on LinkedIn. I'm on all platforms as well, Instagram, YouTube. This will be on my YouTube channel. And I hope this has been extremely valuable. So I put these out at least once a month towards the beginning of the month to share with my network. So I hope this has been super valuable. And thank you so much, Drew, for joining me today.
Thanks a lot, Jen. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.